The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. Kaki mai, welcome to Gone by Lunchtime. My name is Toby Manhire and it is 2017. Welcome back to the pod. Ben Thomas.
It's a new year and a new us.
Welcome back, Annabelle Lee.
Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā korua.
I was talking about Jose as well. Jose, I didn't want to leave him out.
No, but I wasn't looking at him then. I was just trying to show off.
I was impressed.
What's been happening? Let's just sort of start on the distinctly personal level rather than getting to the great big bushfire of politics. Annabelle, what have you been doing? The Hui is in abeyance at the moment.
Yes, we've just started back.
Oh, you just started back at work? Mm-hmm. When's first episode?
I think our first record is the 3rd or 4th of March.
Okay, and so
somewhere
that'll be on
in that
TV3.
area. TV3.
Yep. We've missed it, haven't we, Ben? Terribly. The Hui.
I certainly have.
What have you been doing instead?
Sunbathing.
Oh, nice.
In Point Chev. And eating ice creams in Point Chev also. Oh,
the new place with the cuppity ice cream.
No, not that one.
No.
I don't like that one. It's got such a pretentious menu. No, the one down the road. What's a Shakti bowl? Does anyone know what a Shakti bowl is? Can someone help me out?
What?
A Shakti bowl.
Shakti.
A Shakti bowl. Have a look. Check out the menu.
I was at that new cafe. For more on this, you can check out our local cafes of Point Chevalier podcast, which we hope to be introducing soon. Ben Thomas, we know what you did because we had an emergency podcast with you. You went to America.
Oh, you did?
I did.
America.
It was like the final scene of the original Ghostbusters. Cool. You know, the air was opening up, debris and nightmares were flying around.
Were you like the marshmallow man that comes out?
Big orange marshmallow man.
Harsh but probably accurate. And since getting back, I've just been transfixed with horror as it unfolds in the world's second largest democracy. On the second to last day that I was in the States, I popped into the 9/11 Museum in New York. Which is an amazing sort of curatorial and design kind of project to evoke the Twin Towers and sort of what happened at the World Trade Center on 9/11. And it's actually got a lot of sort of background text, a lot of explanatory stuff, and it goes into quite a bit of depth about Al-Qaeda and specifically points out that the point of the ultimate goal of the terrorists as extreme Salafists is the segregation of the Muslim and non-Muslim worlds, which I found very poignant and sadly ironic a couple of days later when the new president sort of ground into action.
Are the Freedom Towers open yet?
Yeah, the Freedom Tower's open, and the footprint of the World Trade Center, the two Twin Towers, are these sort of huge pools with waterfalls kind of disappearing into a void. It's all very moving. And then the 9/11 museum is actually underneath. So it uses one of the original retaining walls to keep the Hudson River out of the foundations of the World Trade Center, as one of the internal walls of the museum. It's It's a crazy place, the sort of whole fire engines in there as an exhibit, with their back ends sort of warped and melted, looking like an avant-garde sort of art kind of piece, but actually just the sort of the debris of the explosions and the heat.
Is there still like a strong sense of tapu there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the original site has actually been really integrated into it. You've got sort of old structural girders kind of, like placed there, and where there's a staircase, they actually place one of the remnants of one of the staircases that was used to escape from the second tower, sort of alongside it. So it's I mean, in terms of America, probably the most sacred place, sort of, I think, these days. Yeah.
We'll come back to Trump in a little bit, particularly as it pertains to New Zealand, an election year. We'll talk a bit about that, the election coming up. But we're speaking on February the 7th, which is, of course, the day after Waitangi Day. So let's start there. Although it's fair to say we were going to record last week, but then Ben Thomas, who works for shadowy political PR firm Exceltium, had to go to Wellington for some shadowy business, for some shadowy client, no doubt, wasn't it, Ben? I assume.
Yeah, currently my day job still pays more than my podcast royalties. I mean, if people could share and download Gone by Lunchtime and free me from this burdensome toil.
I noticed that you have completely overlooked the fact that there is a packet of macaroons open on the table here, and that is gratis, all right? But I raised that really not to assault Ben, although that's a happy byproduct. I raised it because Annabelle said that we couldn't record it without Ben because that would be like Oasis playing without Liam.
The shit Gallagher brother.
And I thought I should give you an opportunity to respond to that slur, Ben.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially with Noel's post-Oasis career, where he just sings all the songs himself with any sort of four guys he's rounded up from a pub. At the time,
Yeah.
like only 90s kids will remember how deeply hurtful this is.
Except that Liam had a lot of charisma. I mean, he may have been,
and a lot of birds.
He may have not had an awful lot of substance, but he had sort of limitless charisma until he didn't anymore. So I don't know.
I thought it was a mihi myself.
Waitangi Day, Annabelle. The two, I suppose, big issues that kind of made their way into the mainstream at least were Bill English's decision not to go, which was telegraphed at the end of last year, and then the imposition of a fee for media attending. Should we start with Bill English? Should he have been there? Did it matter that he decided to instead he went to Ngāti Whātua commemorations? Was that not all okay in the end?
I'm sure he had a lovely day at Orake with Ngāti Whātua, but the Prime Minister should be at Waitangi on Waitangi Day. And I think, given that there was a big story last year about how politicians don't turn up for, the final readings of treaty settlements. So when you roll up to Waitangi on Waitangi Day and expect speaking rights and to be feted, it seems a little bit ridiculous when you're not interested in showing up to Waitangi stuff that actually happens in Parliament. So I thought it was a sign of weakness on his part. I think he should have fronted up and he would have been respected more for it.
Ben?
No, I disagree. I think that every administration eventually loses patience with the Te Tii Marae Committee. It happened with John Key, who had made a point of promising to attend Waitangi every year after Helen Clark had stopped attending because she got upset. I don't think she went for the last 6 or 7 years of her tenure. I think Bolger did go, Shipley maybe didn't, Longy stopped going for a while, I think. It's just one of these things that happens. It's a poorly organised event. One thing to remember about Waitangi Day is it's not actually just Māori Day. It's about the Māori-Crown relationship, which is what the treaty is. The Crown is not merely a silent partner or a nice-to-have there. And I think you've got to accord a little respect to the Prime the problem is not any kind of huge ideological cleavage or anything. It's just that, this is a small rural marae. They don't have great organisational capabilities. It's not run by professionals. And so the event ends up as a bit of a farce every year. Bill English, in political terms, has been completely vindicated. I think over the weekend, with this kerfuffle about sort of media access, sort of tarpaulins being pulled up and police shuffling media off because they had refused to pay a koha, which it's totally the marae's right to charge, or to ask for, at any rate. Andrew Little said that if media were banned, he'd boycott the lower marae as well. Well, so essentially what you've got in professional wrestling terms, you'd call it a schmozzle, and no one can really remember. no one really remembers the nuances of it, except that it all turned into a big shit fight, and Bill English was smart enough to stay away.
Isn't there though some sense in which it's a schmozzle and a shit fight, but it's our schmozzle, and Leonie Hayden made a good point. I think the editor of Mana magazine made a good point, which was that you don't get invited to a church service and expect to deliver the sermon.
I totally agree. I think you're right, Ben, in terms of it being not run professionally. Like, it's a marae committee, so it's always going to be subject to internal politics. But in terms of the Crown being a silent partner on Waitangi Day, far from it. And do you think that the Marae Committee of Te Tii could go down to Parliament and expect speaking rights and to ask questions at questions time and all of that stuff? On Waitangi Day, Te Tii marae, for better or for worse, the tikanga that's developed over time in our country is that is the Parliament, and the mana of that marae and the tikanga of that marae should be how the day is governed, whether you agree with it or not, and everybody can get up and have their say and put their 2 cents worth in and disagree and debate, and that's the wonderful thing about living in a democracy. But to just simply say, I'm not going because it's not being run the way I want it to be run is ridiculous. And the other thing too is, my understanding is that although he wasn't allowed to speak during the pōwhiri initially, he was going to be given another opportunity to speak. Given the marae is one of the few places where our language thrives, the only place where it thrives, on Waitangi Day, can we not uphold that one tikanga? Can there not be that one place for Te Reo? He has a soapbox every other day of the year.
It does seem, doesn't it, though, Annabelle, strange that both in the past, for most of Key's time, he was given an opportunity to speak, and why it seems sort of almost petulant to sort of make these changes, and then you've got on top of that this $10,000 fee that was being imposed for media to go, which immediately puts them offside. Do you think people are being too precious about that? My immediate response to that was...
I think the media's response to that has been absolutely pathetic. So, because they can't go on to Te Tii marae, instead of doing any meaningful Waitangi coverage, we just get them tossing their toys on the grass outside Te Tii and basically being in victim mode and woe is me and all the rest of it. Why not do some stories about why Māori are overrepresented in every negative statistic in this country and how that relates to the treaty not being honoured? No, we just get endless PTCs of reporters feeling sorry for themselves outside Te Tii. The irony is that basically none of them in the mainstream, except a small handful, speak Māori anyway, so wouldn't even know what was happening on Te Tii.
What would you have done if you'd been up there with a team for the hui?
Well, I wouldn't have paid $10,000 because I think that's far too much. So I would have changed the types of stories that we did and perhaps focused on something like that and left the politicians to it, because Waitangi Day is not all about them.
And what would you have done if you'd been an advisor, a media advisor to Te Tii committee?
I would have said for them not to charge that amount.
Okay.
But you know what? That's their marae. It's private property. They can charge whatever they like, and it's our right to say, no, we're not going to pay that. We'll leave you guys to it. We're going to go do our own stories. But to stand outside Te Tii, I just thought looked pathetic.
Ben, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, look, Te Tii Marae Committee has to decide: are they a private marae, a private organisation and group, or are they the centrepiece of our national days commemorations, or the day before at any rate. And I think there's a tension between those two things. You can't say that all eyes should be on Te Tii Marae, and also we're going to charge media organisations a pretty outlandish fee. I can't believe that the Crown doesn't provide a significant enough koha to cover whatever catering costs there are. But
I hear what you're saying, Ben. Like, there is that tension between, Te Tii being the place where Waitangi happens, the heart of Waitangi, and, the ability for everyone to cover it. Obviously, that's what we would like, but I understand their frustration where every year you round up an army of volunteers who direct all the traffic and put up the marquees and run the cup of teas and help people out and all of that. They do it all for free, and then when the coverage goes to air, basically they get crapped on every year, or all of that stuff is completely ignored so that the dildo tosser becomes the main story and the focus of the day. So I understand their sense of frustration. Why put on this show of manakitanga when it all gets sort of thrown in your face ultimately anyway?
Thrown in your face, quite literally in the case of Steve, Bill English, as you say, was at Oraki, and he had just, I think, exited the marae and got back in the car, and he had a telephone call from the Marshmallow Man, the Lucasade Marshmallow Man, and that went for 15 minutes, and he was credited, Annabelle, with having lasted that long by one or two reports. And this was a sign. I mean, I guess he's got 5 children, so he's used to dealing with rabble, but to have, that was a call we were expecting. What do you think they talked about? How do you think that went?
I liked the photo of him in the back of the car, trying to act real casual and cool, rolling
focused,
like
casual.
Gangster.
How many buttons undone?
At least 2, eh?
I think it was 2 undone.
No tie to be seen.
No tie.
So casual.
It's a national holiday. Waitangi Day is for all New Zealanders, even tireless ones.
Well, Waitangi Day will now be remembered as an important day in New Zealand's history because it's when Bill English spoke to Donald Trump on the telephone for 15 minutes.
Like, what more mana-enhancing event could have happened on Waitangi Day than
I
that?
like that Trump's advisors are obviously, they're kind of calibrating him in real time. An hour with Malcolm Turnbull was too much. He kind
I think, frankly, for anyone, an hour with
perfed on
Malcolm
that
Turnbull
after
is
sort of
too much.
30 minutes. So they were like, well, okay, we'll start him with 15 minutes with the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Maybe work him up to sort of 20 minutes with the head of the EU or something.
It's only a matter of time until someone publishes a list, and it might be me, of how New Zealand comes top on the minutes per capita in conversations with Donald Trump.
There is a very, I think the other discussions with the Yugoslav. No,
I'm not up to speed on that.
That's not even a real country anymore. I think he had two other presidential calls that day, and apart from that, it was the Super Bowl.
Yes,
and
Fox
speeches.
News. Fox News big interview that he trailed heavily on his Twitter.
Yeah,
account.
so I think we have a good claim to probably being the best phone call of the day.
How did
beating our neighbours
as
across
opposed to
the
the
ditch
worst?
again?
They were the worst. It was the worst call, Mr. Trumbull.
What was hilarious about the Trumbull Trump call was these back channel briefings through which each tried to sort of assert their kind of manhood and about how each had scolded the other one. So Turnbull/Trumbull would not comment sort of publicly after being cucked by Trump's advisors in the media, But then high-ranking officials revealed to the Australian press that actually Malcolm Turnbull thought he was a bully, and he knew that the only way to deal with a bully was to stand up to him and bully him back.
He bullied him back.
Off the record.
Bullied him back.
A firm off-the-record bullying.
That is strictly deep background, but Malcolm bullied him back.
Yeah, you could say shirt-fronted him.
Shirt-fronted? Oh, my God, imagine that. That's taking me back. Vladimir Putin, actually, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe Putin had instructed through his compromat president that he was to be, forget it, shirt-fronted. How did he handle it generally? English has come under some pressure over the whatever you want to call it, the visa ban, the extreme vetting. And, everywhere around the world, leaders were
The
called
Muslim
upon. That's what the president has called it from time to time. So let's go with that. How do you think English was criticised for being slow, for being sluggish in his response, and for being insufficiently condemning in his response? What do you guys reckon?
How do you think the phone call would have gone about that stuff?
I doubt it would have been raised, except in passing, sort of, a bit of discussion over here about your immigration ban, as it would have been known on that phone call. Bill was a bit slow out of the blocks on it. It took him about a day and a half to comment. So I think he was failed by his foreign minister there. And
his foreign minister then condemned the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
And then Macaulay kicked the Ministry of Foreign Affairs right in the gonads.
Yeah, that was. I would have been. I would have been a bit pissed off if I was a staffer at Foreign Affairs. You should have worked harder to confirm the details. All right, mate. Yeah, all right. We sent a lot of faxes. We sent so many faxes. The best faxes.
And the thing is, because, we already know that the Trump administration is not communicating through ordinary lines. So when Trump called John Key upon assuming the president, on winning the election, he didn't actually arrange that through the State Department. So, these normal lines of communication are much less valuable than they once were. Everyone is kind of winging it in the White House right now, it seems. There was that remarkable New York Times piece about meetings being basically conducted in the dark because nobody in the administration knows where the light switches are, or how to work the meeting.
The idea of Bannon stalking around dusky room issuing instructions.
That's right. The White House administration is sort of Edgar Allan Poe Gothic short story.
We have Annabelle 200 and something days to go, probably about 229 days to go. Bill English announced the election day at the start of last week. It is September the 23rd. So we kind of all go, how do you reckon Bill English has gone so far? I mean, he's now been in the role, 2 months, I guess? Just under 2 months. Most of that has been summer holiday, and he had a reasonably successful trip in Europe, but didn't get much coverage because the New Zealand media stops completely over the break. How would you review his performance so far? Do you think it's...
Well, I mean, he hasn't... I guess he's performed as expected, except for Waitangi. I thought that he would have shown stronger leadership on that one, to be fair. So not ranking highly with me.
Ben?
Started off well. One thing that characterises Bill English is that he always looks at two sides of things. In interviews you can often sort of hear him thinking out, going through his thought processes.
Yeah.
That can be a disadvantage on something like the immigration ban that we were talking about, where people want a clear, direct, quick statement of principle. So Bill's challenge through until the election will be to avoid any suggestion that his thoughtfulness is a mark of indecisiveness. He probably didn't start out great in the first couple of weeks this year on that score for that reason. On the other hand, his sort of clear decision about Waitangi Day, I think, is contra Annabelle, I think it's actually been vindicated by the subsequent mess. And luckily...
Paula had fun. Paula had a great time.
I'd just like to interject here. Perhaps the most exciting thing on the spin-off this week, stay tuned, listeners, readers, is we have a Paula Bennett review of Guns N' Roses going up on the site. Guns N' Roses live in Auckland. Annabelle's shaking her head at me. She's disappointed. I think there's going to be
I'm not disappointed. I'm jealous that you can get her to do stuff with you guys.
Oh, that's right.
So
she didn't
lucky.
come on your show. Paula, come on the hooey. But you promised to talk only about Guns N' Roses.
Don't you reckon if Trump had run Key, that conversation would have gone for like 45 minutes to an hour? It would have been so funsies, and they would have talked about golf and the best eats in Hawaii. It would have been so cool.
They're two fully grown adult sons.
I'm more a Lynx man. Are you a Lynx man or
Old Spice?
But speaking of an appetite...
Speaking of golf, but that too.
I was just going to do the smoothest segue of my entire adult life.
Go.
I was going to say,
everyone listen.
Speaking of an appetite for destruction,
Nice.
one thing that plays into Bill English's hands coming up into the election is the fact that the Labour self-implosion train is never late.
Oh, Labour. So, Labour. Let's talk about Labour. Everything is shaking down. Like we said, September 23rd, and people are starting to think about draft lists for our MMP system. There are a few remaining battles for selection in the various parties for seats. I don't know if there are many left with National. Labour's got a few to go. But the big one in the last couple of weeks, Annabelle Lee, is Willie Jackson, who was hotly tipped as the Māori Party candidate for Tamaki Makaurau. In fact, I think it was being talked about as an almost dead cert, wasn't it?
Or mana.
Or mana, okay.
I think it was certainly being talked about by Willie.
Well, it was a pretty open secret. Let's put it that way.
Then I actually heard the Labour Party rumour, and I thought that is just crazy. That cannot be true because Willie's on the record. His level of vitriol towards the Labour Party is well known. So I was like, no, that's ridiculous. That can't happen, because the rumour was that Labour were actually trying to heavy Penny Henare into relinquishing Tamaki Makaurau and standing on the list so that Willie could stand. I was like, surely not.
I don't even think that's a rumour. I'm happy to say that's true.
No, well, that has since been confirmed, but it seemed so outlandish at the time.
Right.
But
now Willie's there.
Willie
Willie won't be standing in Tamaki Makaurau, but he has been apparently guaranteed a single digit.
And this is where it all gets interesting, because my understanding is that he will need to seek a waiver because he has been a member for less than 12 months.
Right.
And that the waiver hasn't in fact been granted yet, but they've gone public with it, which seems a little presumptuous, to curtail your own party's processes like that. But what's really interesting is the implosion that's occurred in Labour following it. So you have, the guy that ran Andrew Little's campaign starting a petition beseeching Labour to get rid of him. You've got Poto Williams, writing Facebook posts, raising the Roastbusters issue.
Labour
so you
Party
have to wonder, what was...
This is a senior Labour spokesperson.
You would have thought that Little would knowing what a controversial figure Willie is, that he would have perhaps sat down with some key figures in Labour first and sort of worked this all through, so that when the announcement happened, that it was all clean and tidy, everyone was squared away. But no, typical Labour, who love to lurch from one disaster to the next, squirted out at Waitangi, and then all hell breaks loose.
The much lauded southern strategy of the Labour Party, moving Chief of Staff Matt McCartan up to Auckland to concentrate on the sort of Manukau and sort of Auckland metropolitan area, basically seems to involve McCartan kind of prizing these frozen alliance MPs out of like a cryogenic chamber,
like Passenger.
That's right. Reheating them to do interviews with the spin-off about their aspirations, or to
Ben is referring to an interview with Laila Hare, who, like Willie Jackson, is a former member of the Alliance, and like Willie Jackson, is close to Matt McCartan, who was Chief of Staff for Labour and is now their kind of Auckland czar. And according to a report in the Herald, she's now less inclined to try and go for this time round. But she also has rejoined the Labour and described it which was interesting, as an anchor party. So I suppose the one way to look at it is that, notwithstanding the obvious sort of the political management of it all is pretty hopeless, it seems to me. But the argument, I guess, would be that Labour is re-establishing itself as the party it was before all the shit went down in the 80s. That we are now, the Alliance split off, the New Labour split off, the Alliance, blah, 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 and now Labour's coming home to its base.
Wouldn't you do that with, like, policies that reflected that, though?
Well, I think so.
Rather than just, like, pulling people out of their cryogenic chambers.
Well, they've
as
got
Ben
a,
so
they've got a
aptly
few.
says.
3 years of free tertiary education, I guess, is one.
There's one.
Let me just put this theory out there about Willie Jackson, because he's been really lauded by Little and the Labour media apparatus, and also by some commentators I have never heard of who have now become experts on Māori politics, which is that he is the key to Labour capturing the urban Māori vote. Now, Willie ran
Is that the
mayor,
same as
I think.
Waitakere Man? That's different. Waitakere Man isn't urban Māori, is it?
Some Waitakere men
It's a bit of
are
a crossover
Māori.
in
They would be
the
urban Māori who have lost, who
I'm just trying to
don't
remember
have
that.
strong
That was
whakapapa
John
roots.
Tamahiri, wasn't it? Waitakere Man. Sorry, I interrupted. Go. You were expounding your theory.
And I have this terrible feeling that Andrew Little was sold on this idea because Willie Jackson was just one of the most prominent Māori he had heard of. And so he thinks that he's a big vote getter.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me as being the ultimate heist by Matt McCartan, because I wonder if he has perhaps oversold Willie's influence in terms of Māori politics, because if you look at his track record, he hasn't been a particularly successful politician, and as you mentioned, even the Manukau City Council, he didn't win, and Labour and Little, being so indifferent and ignorant to Te Ao Māori, has bought it hook, line and sinker, and it seems like an easy fix. Oh yeah, we'll grab Willie. Okay, cool, we're all squared away now. How that will actually play out, I'm intrigued to know. And yeah, there was an opinion piece about how this is going to be catastrophic for Hone. It means Hone won't come back. To be fair, I don't think Willie's influence stretches to the north. And then someone said to me, "Oh, it's because he, gave Hone a strategy." Well, Hone lost the last election, so that's hardly a ringing endorsement of his strategic skills in that area.
Did he advise him to join the internet party with Kim.com and Laila Hare?
But certainly, Willie is a very noisy voice of opposition, and in that regard, it will be helpful for Labour to have him on side rather than throwing stones from the sidelines. But in terms of his credibility, having been so critical of Labour over the foreshore and seabed and various other issues, it'll be interesting to see how it's received by Māori over the following months.
And of course, even a single-digit list position on the Labour Party may very seriously not result in a seat, given the way things pan out with the system and the constituencies. I mean, you kind of how many list MPs have Labour got now, Ben?
It's very, very few.
Very
it's
few.
about
5 or 6.
6, yeah, I think.
And
they need to rebalance those with women on the list to ensure parity, because the majority of their electorates are held by men. So in line with trying to get a sort of 50-50 split, any man on the list, I mean, Andrew Little is probably going to have to enter on the list unless Annette King lays down Rongotai for him.
No, Rongotai's gone. He decided not. It's gone to that guy who's the deputy mayor of Eagle.
Oh,
he's unopposed in Rongotai.
What a long break it's been.
Yeah,
the world's shifted under my feet.
It's true. It's true.
I have a real issue with a leader that isn't able to win an electorate.
Bill English is on the list.
I just think it's bad. But Bill has been able to win electorates over and over and over again, to be fair.
That's true.
When you're not even able to convince people in your own neighbourhood to vote for you, I question how you can encourage an entire nation to follow you.
I think Little would have pushed harder in Rongotai. I suspect that he would have pushed harder to get Rongotai if it hadn't been for the fact that he was going up against someone who is also on the list. So that kind of defuses that argument.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Little still seems committed to actually standing in New Plymouth, which will lead to, the kind of alarming prospect of the leader, the next presumptive Prime Minister of New Zealand losing by a big margin to Jonathan Young, who's a National Party backbencher. I think he's just recently been appointed as Under Secretary of Regional Development. But, this is... Jonathan Young is a really great electorate MP, but he's not a big political player, and he has trounced Andrew Little.
He has. I'd have to check this, but I think that Andrew Little is going to do a list-only campaign, and I think he'd be mad to...
That would be wiser.
Yeah, and to do a whole, it's now my constituency is the length of the country, yada, yada, yada.
So how does that work then in terms of, how electorate MPs get much better resourcing than list MPs? Do you have a leader that doesn't have as much resource as others?
Prime Minister gets more resourcing than anyone. That makes up for it.
Thank you for joining us on this first spin-off Gone by Lunchtime podcast of 2017. I have to go now and see if Donald Trump's tweeted anything, because in the time that's passed I get a little bit edgy. You can check out our other range of podcasts at thespinoff.co.nz/podcasts, and you can like us on iTunes if you're into that. And Ben, Annabelle, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you again. Very good to see you. Thank you, Jose Barbosa.
Kia ora, Jose.
You're brilliant. See you next time. Bye.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spinoff. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.